Now we're done with the overview. Let's proceed with the specific things that happen in the two phases. Let us first start with the discussion of the light reactions or the photochemical reactions, which again, it is the process of the conversion of light energy into a chemical form of energy. But before that, we usually see leaves as color green. Now, why do leaves appear as color green? The answer lies to the nature of light and the composition of the leaves. Light is a form of electromagnetic energy which travels in waves. Also, light is composed of packets of energy or energy of energy called as photons. The energy of these can be categorized based on the radiant energy that they contain. Radiation travels in waves which can be quantified based on the wavelength, which is the distance between the two successive peaks, which are called as the throw. The electromagnetic spectrum, which is found on the left, is plotted in a straight line, starting from the leftmost having the longest wavelength, which becomes shorter toward the right. As the wavelength shortens or decreases, the energy becomes stronger. Hence, the strongest wave is the gamma rays. On the other hand, there is a special, very small portion in the wavelength, which is called as the visible spectrum, which is found in this portion. This visible spectrum contains just the right amount of energy that plants need to perform photosynthesis. It ranges from 380 nanometers up to 740 nanometers. The colors of this light in this spectrum is visible to the human eye, hence the name. Now, what makes plants special? It's because they have these pigments that are capable of absorbing visible light. Green plants have pigments called as chlorophyll, which may be in the form of chlorophylls A, B, C, or D, and also other photosynthesizing bacteria have their own green pigments, which are called as bacteriochlorophyll. But aside from being green, plants may also appear in other colors such as bright yellow, red, and orange colors, which is because of the presence of the pigments called as carotenoids. Carotenoids may be in the form of lycopene, zeaxanthin, and carotene, but aside from these two, there are also other pigments that are found in different plants. Now going back to the question, why most plants appear as color green, it is because green plants' main chlorophyll pigment is the chlorophyll A. In the figure, you can see the absorption spectrum of chlorophyll A. Y-axis is the percent absorption, while in the x-axis is the wavelength. As what you can see, there is a very high absorption of color violet and color red. So these two wavelengths are what are absorbed mostly by green plants. On the other hand, green color is not absorbed. Thus, it is being reflected by these pigments. Hence, these plants appear as color green. This means that green is not absorbed, but it is reflected. Hence, they appear as color green. Now, where are these pigments found? These pigments are found in the thylakoid membrane. Again, these are thylakoid, and thylakoids have their own membrane, which is this. Okay. These pigments, together with their associated proteins, make up the photosystems. Now, this is the thylakoid membrane, and again, this is where the pigments are found. So, these round shapes here are the pigment molecules in which they are embedded in proteins, which make up now photosystems. In general, this is how it looks like. So this is the thylakoid again, and their associated photosystems. And as what you can see, there are two photosystems, which are the photosystem 1, which is this one, and then the photosystem 2. Again, photosystems are embedded in the thylakoid membrane, and this is where light reactions take place. In closer look of the photosystems, that is shown in the figure right now, this is photosystem 2, and this one is the photosystem 1. And talking about photosystems, these are their parts. First, it has light harvesting complexes, which is made up of the pigment molecules in green. So this part here is the light harvesting complexes, which are made up of the pigment molecules. So these now are the pigment molecules. In this case, these are the chlorophyll molecules, in which these are bound to proteins in color purple, as what you can see there on the screen. These pigments, for example, the chlorophylls, funnel the energy of photons to the reaction center, which is the next part of the photosystem. Now, The reaction system or the reaction center is consists of the following parts. A central chlorophyll, which always come in pair, so this would be called as the special pair, and then the primary electron acceptor, and then the core proteins which hold these together. Again, these are the two types of photosystems. In photosystem 1, we have the reaction center, which is this one. It accepts a wavelength of about 700 nanometers, and the primary electron acceptor of photosystem 1 is called as the chlorophyll A sub 0. And photosystem 1 has a lot of chlorophyll A compared to chlorophyll B. And also photosystem 1 later on is involved in cyclic and non-cyclic electron flow. On the other hand, for photosystem 2, the reaction center only accepts a wavelength of about 680 nanometers, or the special pair. And then the primary electron acceptor of photosystem 2, which is this one, is called as the pheophytene. And in contrast to photosystem 1, photosystem 2 has a lot of chlorophyll B compared to chlorophyll A, and this photosystem is only involved in the non-cyclic electron flow. Now, for the non-cyclic electron flow, it is the primary electron pathway or the primary pathway of energy transformation in the light reactions. The process involves both of the photosystems, which are the photosystems 1 and 2, with the photosynthetic electron transport chain and the enzyme, which is called as the ATP synthase. In the process, oxygen molecules are produced and are released as a form of atmospheric oxygen, and ATP and NADPH are also produced, which are used to create now the carbohydrates in the next stage of photosynthesis. Now, for the non-cyclic electron flow, the first step is the absorption of photons via the pigment molecules in the photosystem 2. As what you can see there, the photons now are being absorbed by the chlorophyll molecules. Now, what involves first in the flow is the photosystem 2. Photosystems are named based on their sequence of discovery. So, photosystem 1 was discovered first, while photosystem 2 was discovered next. But again, photosystem 2 is the one that is involved first in the process. Now, the photon energizes the chlorophyll molecules, which makes them transfer electrons from one chlorophyll to another chlorophyll. So from being in a ground state, once they are being hit with a photon, they become excited. Therefore, they transfer now their electrons from one chlorophyll to another. And when the P680 or the special pair of photosystem 2 absorbs it, it enters into an excited state. So it now has high energy. Now, the excited P680 is a good donor and can transfer its excited electrons not to the other chlorophyll molecules, but only to the primary electron acceptor of the photosystem 2, which is called as the pheophytene. To replace electrons in the P680 or the special pair, the positively charged P680 can pull electrons off of water because it is electron hungry. In other words, once the P680 loses electrons, it becomes a good oxidizing agent. So what it oxidizes is the water molecule. So when this happens, this is called as the photolysis. In the process, water is split into two molecules of protons and also two electrons and also 1/2 oxygen. This 1/2 oxygen immediately bonds with another 1/2 oxygen molecule to create one molecule of oxygen, which is then expelled by the plants through its stomata. This oxygen molecule contributes to the atmospheric oxygen that us humans breathe in. This is the presentation or the representation of photolysis. Again, with the aid of the photons coming from the sunlight, water is split into two. And therefore, these are now the products, 1/2 oxygen, 2 hydrogen protons, and 2 electrons, in which these 2 electrons are going to replace the lost electrons in the P680 of photosystem 2. Now, the electron in the pheophytene is passed along the electron transport chain. And as the electrons pass through the electron transport chain, it powers up the movement of the hydrogen protons from the stroma to the thylakoid space, making now an imbalance or a gradient. Therefore, there are now a lot of protons in the thylakoid lumen or in the thylakoid space than the stroma. If you are going to ask, this is what the electron transport chain is. The ETC is just a series of proteins where electrons are being passed on, hence the name electron transport chain. And these proteins are the PQ, B6F, PC, and FD, in which PQ stands for plastoquinone, B6F stands for cytochrome, PC stands for plastocyanine, and FD stands for ferredoxine. As electrons are passed through the electron transport chain, they lose energy in the form of heat. Therefore, once it reaches the P700 of the photosystem 1, it is back to its ground state or low energy state. What happens there is that photons will be absorbed by the pigments of photosystem 1 and is channeled to the special pair of the P700 or of the photosystem 1 where the electrons are found. So electrons are in this special pair are re-energized. Once it is re-energized, the P700 passes the electron to the primary electron acceptor of the photosystem 1, which is called as chlorophyll A sub 0, which is then transferred to another protein, to the last protein of the electron transport chain, which is called as the ferredoxine. Now, ferredoxine transfers now the electrons to the NADP plus in the presence of the enzyme called as the NADP plus reductase to reduce now NADP plus to NADH. So the electrons are used now to reduce NADP plus to make now NADPH molecules in the stroma. Again, this is how it looks like. In the process, we have already produced oxygen molecules and NADPH in the stroma. But how are ATP molecules produced? Because of the movement of ions earlier in the electron transport chain from the stroma to the thylakoid space, there is a creation of a gradient or an imbalance of molecules. On this side of the membrane are lots of ions. On this side or in the stroma are few. Chemiosmosis is like almost every osmotic reaction is that it is always moving toward an unequal amount on both sides. That's what motivates these transports of ions. So ions from the thylakoid space, which is from here, have to go back to the stroma. And the only way to go back is through this enzyme, which is called as the ATP synthase. So as the ATP synthase is moving the protons of hydrogen across this membrane, this action of moving along the electrochemical gradient creates kinetic energy or energy processed by motion. This energy is then attached to the organic molecules of ADP, making ATP molecules. So ADP, the energy that is harnessed because of the movement of hydrogen protons through the ATP synthase is used to phosphorylate ADP molecules to become ATP molecules. So that is how ATPs are produced, and ATPs are produced in the stroma. So this is how ATP synthesis happens with the help of the energy from the movement of protons through ATP synthase. And this is called as the chemiosmosis. So again, this is the thylakoid space and this is the stroma. So in the chemiosmosis, the hydrogen protons have to go back into the stroma. So in the process, the energy harnessed through the movement of the hydrogen protons are used or is used to phosphorylate ADP to become ADP molecules, in which these ATP molecules are now found in the stroma. On the other hand, the cyclic electron flow, as the name suggests, it is a cyclical or a repeated process. Unlike non-cyclic electron flow, it only involves photosystem 1, the electron transport chain, and ATP synthase. And in the process, it only produces ATP molecules. Cyclic electron flow happens simultaneously with the non-cyclic electron flow. In the process, so this is how the cyclic electron flow looks like. In the process, pigment molecules in photosystem 1 absorb photons of the light. The energy of photons are funneled to the reaction center of the chlorophyll. or reaction center chlorophyll, which is the special pair of photosystem 1. And then the energized electrons are transferred to the primary electron acceptor of photosystem 1, which is called as chlorophyll A sub 0. The energized electrons are transferred to ferredoxin, an electron carrier. In here, the ferredoxin does not transfer the electrons to the NADP plus reductase. Therefore, no ADP molecules are produced. In here, ferredoxin transfers the electrons to the electron transport chain, specifically to plastoquinone. And then plastoquinone carries the electrons to a complex of two cytochromes, starting from here, and then until it reaches the plastocyanine. As this happens, the same with non-cyclic electron flow, hydrogen protons are being pumped from the stroma to the thylakoid space, making now a gradient or an imbalance of protons in and out of the thylakoid space. Now, the electrons are returned by the plastocyanine to the P700 pigment in the reaction center. And again, the process repeats. As what you can observe, there is no production of NADPH molecules nor oxygen in this process. But there is only a production of ATP, which is produced through chemiosmosis via the enzyme called as the ATP synthase. Overall, the products of the light reactions are ATP and NADPH, which are used to the next major stage of photosynthesis, which is the carbon reactions. And also, there is a production or a release of oxygen. And again, NADPH and ATPs are used now to synthesize carbohydrates later on in the process called as the carbon reactions.